Chapter 26 Sonata of the Soul. As Hela watched, everything happened at once. Fragile little Bran brutally sacrificed to the Rayan god. Scatter's flame sparking to life, about to erupt. Karta flinging himself onto Scatter and knocking him off Kartha to the roof. Karta held him in a headlock, one hand over his mouth, straining to control his leader while speaking through clenched teeth as quickly as he could. Scatter, listen! We will kill all of them for that, but you can't go in yet. Give me 2 minutes to survey the surroundings, then we'll obliterate them. But Scatter was like a man possessed. He wrestled and bucked, throwing Karta aside and scrambling on his hands and knees towards the edge of the roof. Karta dove onto his back, flattening him just before he reached the edge. This time, he wrapped Scatter's neck in a chokehold, attempting to pacify him when, from his vantage at the roof's edge, Karta noticed something. Scatter, he hissed. Look right there at the side of the stage. They're going to bring another sacrifice up. His squad leader stopped thrashing and directed his gaze where Karta was pointing. When his eyes adjusted to the distance, there it was. Another unmistakable Thutan. However, this one was a full-grown man. Karta, Scatter, Fald hissed. Look, just above the man. Do you see that in the air? The way it's distorted? That's the same beam that locked us down at the outer wall. Karta loosened his hold on Scatter, who huffed a few times, then strained to see what Fald was seeing. Once he did, it became obvious. There was a thick, singular beam of distortion coming somewhere from the direction of the city center, Central Arbitration. I see it, Fald, Karta said in a rush. But it only looks like one beam. Didn't you say there were 2 beams at the outer wall that cooperated in locking you and Hülhorn down? Yeah, that's right. I don't know why they only have 1 beam here, but I can tell you, it's much thicker than those other 2. Maybe it's stronger in the city than at the wall. Perhaps, Karta said, pursing his lips. Regardless, this puts our primary plan back on the table. Scatter, we can avenge Bran and effect maximum damage on Epōle still. Will you help us do that if I release you? Scatter, no longer resisting Karta's efforts, sighed. Yeah, I'm good. You can let me go now. Let's get that man charged up before they butcher him, too. Hela, who had been focusing on the Thutan man and the beam Fald was describing, suddenly gasped. Karta, she hissed. That man! It's Falk! She's right. It's him. By Grom, he's right there. What are we going to do now? Hela asked. We can still get down there and save him. You said he was one of the best fire wielders you've ever known. He can join the assault. No, Scatter retorted. He's the biggest mistake the Rayans have ever made. If he becomes Grom's wrath, it'll deliver 10 times as much destruction as any code they could have chosen. What? Hela exclaimed through gritted teeth. Are you completely mad? That's your friend down there, and we can save him. Why would you rather blow him up? I cannot believe we're having this conversation again. Scatter, Karta interjected while getting off his leader's back. I understand the situation, and honestly I agree with you, but Falk's capacity for the unvanquished flame is tantamount to our own. It would take the combined flames of every raider here to supercharge him enough to explode, and we can't all... Karta froze mid-sentence. Unless... He looked at Hela, then back at Scatter. Tell me if this is possible, he asked, locking eyes with his leader. During the Beacon of Unity, you told me Hela was confirmed as the Avatar due to her ability to retain the combined flames of every Thutan in attendance. Scatter's eyes widened. Blessed Mother, that's it! What is? Hela demanded, not liking where this train of thought was going. Scatter leaned closer. It's you! You're the answer! Grom has prepared everything for this moment. He got up to one knee and grabbed Hela's hand in his. You're not only the perfect person to enact Grom's vengeance, but the only person alive who can. Flinching, Hela tore her hand back from Scatter's grasp. Karta picked up where Scatter left off. You're the Avatar, Hela. You're the only Thutan in existence who can contain the flames of multiple other Thutans. In theory, of every other Thutan. Today, we can still lay waste to the city of Epōle in a way never before possible. But we're going to need to fill you with all of our flames to supercharge someone like Falk. It's the only way this can work. I can't believe you people, Hela snarled. That's your comrade. He needs your help, not to be blown up. The Rayans have trapped him here since we left, probably torturing him every day while he hoped we'd come back and save him. Do you really think he'd choose to explode rather than be saved? Yes, I do, Scatter responded. And I know how to settle that. He looked over at Carta. Help her channel the eye. I'm gonna contact Falk. Even in that beam, his mind will be able to see through it. Carta nodded and placed his hand on Hella's head. This won't hurt, but until you've done it a few times, it's hard to channel by yourself. Fine, she snapped, but if he says no, promise me. You have to promise me we'll go in and save him. All my life, little miss, Scatter replied, then looked down, focusing on the ground. His eyes snapped open wide, entirely crimson red. Hella's vision went black at the very same moment. Before she could panic, a small dot of red light appeared in the distance. It grew in size as it seemed to speed towards her, or perhaps she was speeding towards it. It was impossible for her to tell in this disorienting alien environment. The dot expanded to encompass everything she could see, although it was all tinted in a red hue. Suddenly, she realized, I'm seeing through Scatter's eyes. He was motioning hand signs. Hella couldn't understand them, but once he was done, the vantage point shrunk back down and zipped away off to her left, or she zipped away off to her right. Whatever was happening, she started to see another dot in the distance coming toward her, opening up in the same way that the last one did. It filled her entire vision, just like before, except this vantage point was different. It was from the ground level, at the front of the ceremony. She was seeing through Falk's eyes now. The vision was completely transfixed. No hand signals. His body was frozen. But something caught her attention. The red tint of the vision began pulsing in bright bursts. He was signaling. Unable to use his hands, Falk was pulsing his flame in response to Scatter. The vision then shrunk back down to a dot and rushed away into the distance. Suddenly, Hella saw in front of her own body again, as if she was shot awake out of a dream. There we have it, Scatter announced. He's on board. Wait a moment, Hella protested. How can you possibly know that? All he was doing was pulsing his flame. That could have meant anything. No, Hella, Carta said. The pulse was a code to the affirmative. You can see it in the pattern and sense it in his intention. Did you feel it? I don't believe you. I didn't feel anything except his flame going up and down. You're making this up so you can blow him up without his say-so. Admit it. You both just want to blow him up. A voice spoke up in opposition. You're wrong, Hella. The voice was Fald's. He's still pulsing right now. Look. She looked back over the roof's edge. Sure enough, Falk's chest was clearly blinking red in a sequence. Now, Fald continued, feel it. Hella looked over to Fald, who was patting his chest over his heart. She looked back at Falk, thinking about how she had felt Crod's flame so clearly as they approached Staunt. Moments passed as she focused. Then, something took her breath away. I can feel, she started, tears forming in the corner of her eyes. I feel his pain. Her hands both shot up to her mouth, covering a gasp. He's begging for Grom's mercy. It's all he wants, just to go back to her, in fire. Senna hugged his sister, who had begun to quietly sob. It has to be you, Miss Hella, Scatter reiterated, placing his hand on her shoulder. You've been chosen for this unenviable task. It has to be you. She nodded slowly, fighting back the tears. Okay, I'll do it. She sniffed hard. I'll do it for Falk. Bless you, Avatar, Scatter said, placing his other hand on her other shoulder. Let's get back from the edge of the roof for this, Carta suggested. The light will be obvious. He looked behind them on the causeway, then added, in fact, if we back up and put the sunrise behind us, it might mask the flare of our flames. Good plan, Carta. Scatter positioned himself and Hella in this way. Now, Miss Hella, usually this process hurts those who are filled with flame, but you're a different case. I honestly don't know what your experience will be like. So, at least for now, I'm gonna start charging you slowly. You tell me if you need me to slow or stop, all right? Hella nodded. Excellent. Here we go. Scatter ignited, slowly. The hue of his flame grew steadily into a glow. Hella's own flame lit in kind. However, she didn't grimace or call out in pain in reaction to the flame that was filling her, so Scatter increased his intensity further. His glow became intense. If he weren't standing right in front of the rising sun, onlookers might have thought there were two suns cresting the causeway. He lit to maximum burn, his whole body illuminating vibrant neon red. Yet Hella still didn't react. He finally brought his flame back down to an ember. Mother of love, he exclaimed. You truly are the Avatar. There is no doubt about that. How do you feel, little miss? Fine. Her eyes were lit and her chest glowed red, but no more than if she had lit her own flame. Marvelous, Scatter reveled. Hurry, everyone else come here and do the same. We haven't got much time before they act against Folk. Just grab hold of Hela's shoulders and charge up to your maximum flame. She'll absorb everything you got. Carta stepped forward next, following Scatter's lead. Then Fald, then Farah. Finally, Senna stepped toward his sister and reached up to place his hands on her shoulders. Are you sure you're all right with this, Hela? He asked, his mouth trembling. You bet, Finn. It's fine. Don't worry. Senna raised his surprisingly vibrant flame as high as he could, then returned it back to an ember. You see, Hela said to him, Grom's planned everything out for us. Scatter grinned at her affirmation. That's right, Avatar, she has. And now you're set. It's time to make this happen. He glanced at Carta. On my count, you flank left. Farah, you and Fold flank right. Finn, you'll ride with Fold. I'll start things off by heading right down the center. Then he looked back to Hela. You, my dear, will need Drom to leap you over, Folk. Drop down onto him hands first, grabbing his shoulders. We don't know if that beam will lock you when you touch him. If so, you'll at least be connected as you need to be to supercharge him. The moment you touch his shoulders, you need to max out your flame as high and as fast as you can. We'll be making a mess of every Rayan down there while you do, just to distract them. You got it? Yeah, I got it. But if I get stuck to Falk, I'm going to become part of the bomb, won't I? We're going to tear that place apart, Avatar, Fald said. If it's like the outer wall, they'll have to focus on us. Most likely, Carta concurred. For those of us in the melee, try to intermingle with the panic of the Rains. That'll make it difficult for them to target us. Everyone nodded, then peered at Hela. Hela glanced at Drom, who read her intentions and rose from his prone position, coming to her side. She mounted her hound and glanced at Senna one last time. Stay close to Fald and don't do anything crazy, Finn. Do you understand me? Senna puffed his chest out with confidence. I won't, Hela. Just get out of there as soon as you can, okay? Come back to me. They won't know what hit them, she replied with a sly grin. Oh, she was born for this, little Finn, Scatter added. Now hop up in front of Fald on Hülhorn. We've all got some vengeance to mete out. Scatter had waited his entire life for this moment. He glanced to his left and right, ensuring that everyone on his team was in their ready position, then shouted, In the name of Holy Grom, may our fire be her reckoning this day! Cartha lunged down from the causeway roof and crashed into the rear of the orderly crowd, crushing half a dozen Rayan attendees on impact. The flanking raiders followed closely behind, landing on the left and right rear corners of the shocked and confused congregation. Screams shot up from everywhere in the crowd as the four monstrous beasts tore indiscriminately through their ranks. Blood, limbs, and viscera rained down in all directions as pure pandemonium set over the crowd. Orders from Rayan troopers that began to flood into the ceremonial square were drowned out by the horror of screaming, dying civilians. Scatter, Carta, and Fald were all weaving in different directions through the chaotic stampede of fleeing people, but Farah keyed in on the response troopers. She charged, zigzagging toward the column of elite troopers, then leapt off Barrack, who became a Hülhorn missile from the front, while she touched down on the ground and blasted at an obtuse angle through the flank of their orderly Rayan formation. In a matter of moments, the military confidence of Epōle's elite inner round shock troopers dissolved into carnal terror. Flashes of red, a girl's face, one blade instead of an arm, bodies falling to the ground in pieces. One trooper screamed, It's a Thutan demon! A blade devil! This only exacerbated the growing havoc in their ranks. Suddenly, a deep, authoritative voice bellowed out from the shock troopers. Form on me, troopers of Soul! Scatter and Cartha both snapped their heads in the direction of that voice. You! Scatter shouted. There in the center of the now forming Rayan phalanx was the gigantic, one-armed commander from their battle at the outer wall. In place of his right arm was a formidable Rayan saber, not dissimilar to Farah's attachment, but larger and covered in asperite gems. Another one coming in from above! The commander shouted. Focus it down! Scatter sensed Hella's flame passing overhead, heading towards Falk's frozen position. "Oh, you absolutely will not!" he snarled. He dismounted Kartha, grabbed an injured Rayan man off the ground, and launched him at the commander's formation. The focus of his troopers zeroed in on the incoming civilian projectile, freezing him in the air a single length away from them. But before they could set him down, the man exploded as Kartha burst through him and into the unsuspecting ranks of their formation. She then shot off behind the remaining enforcement, drawing their attention just long enough for Scatter to follow through her carnage and grab the commander by the face, transporting him in a flash outside the safety of his men. However, before Scatter could land, the right-armed blade of the hulking Rayan swung toward him. In a momentary decision, Scatter tossed the commander to the ground below, narrowly avoiding the saber's arc, which wound up slicing his mouth instead of his head. He landed some 10 lengths away from the commander and turned to face his adversary, who was also rising to his feet. Scatter's trademark crooked smile now formed a ghoulish chasm of blood and cleaved skin where his lower lip had been sliced in two. Well, the two nemeses stared each other down with the broiling intensity of generational hatred. Scatter spotted Hella some distance behind the commander. She had reached Falk and discreetly backpacked herself to him, charging the would-be sacrifice up with the combined flames of their entire squad. Scatter's grotesque grin grew wider as he spat out blood and murmured, "That's my girl." From the moment Kartha touched down to the moments afterward when hundreds of gathered Rayans turned into a bedlam of screaming and chaos, Hella stayed crouched atop Drom, waiting for the perfect time to launch herself at the target. Watching from her perch was a jaw-dropping reminder of the level of violence a coordinated group of enraged, flame-wielding Theutons could inflict. It was both awe-inspiring and hard to watch at the same time. No one in that crowd was safe from their fury as Rayan blood began to splatter across the ceremony grounds, the majority of it being spilled by Farah's blade. Seeing her fully unleashed in this way sent chills down Hella's spine. Just then, a sizable contingent of troopers coalesced into a structured formation to the right of Falk's position, opening up a large void around her target. "This is our chance, Drom. Send me in. I'll find you again once I'm done charging Falk up, okay?" Drom growled, then barked his agreement, crouching low and lunging high up over top of the massacre below. When she was getting close to Falk's position, Hella leaned backward, flipping off Drom and plummeting hands first toward his shoulders. She twisted halfway down to face the same way as him, made purchase on Falk's shoulders, then closed her eyes and swung into a backpack position to conceal her presence from any onlookers. The moment her body latched onto Falk's, it froze in place. It was just as Scatter worried. The beam that was holding Falk at bay now held her as well. She couldn't move any part of her body at all. Whatever this force was, it was stronger by far than the combined force of the troopers that held her at the outer wall during their escape. "What kind of Rayan sorcery is this thing?" she thought. It felt as though the very blood in her veins was frozen in place, like every molecule of her being was locked in total stasis. She could experience every moment, but it was as if she was no longer part of her body, just a spirit confined within the inexplicable immobility of her flesh. The one thing that remained unconstrained, though, was her mind, and that was the one thing she needed to achieve her aim, the transfer of the unvanquished flame within her. Falk began to glow red, then vibrant red, then luminously red. The light that radiated off of him soon bordered on white hot. It became so bright that everyone still alive in the ceremonial square groaned and shielded their eyes. It was at this point that Hella heard the loud, familiar voice of the gigantic Rayan commander hollering orders. "Arbiter! Lock down the city! Order! Crimson Decay!" All at once, the beam that held her and Falk dropped its hold as deafening sirens began to blare. Scatter shouted as loud as he could, "Retreat! Retreat! And stay off the roofs! Mission is achieved!" Every hullhound returned to their riders, who quickly mounted up, still shielding their eyes, and followed the feeling of Scatter's flame out of the ceremonial square and down the streets toward the dividing wall of the 200 grid. A sound mingled with the blaring of the sirens as they made their escape. It was a gut-wrenching, horrific scream. Hella heard Falk, now free from his beam-bound constraints, trying to contain the flame that was orders of magnitude larger than he could. And he was failing. The scream was still audible several grids away as the light emanating from Falk cast long, dark shadows in front of the raiders who were nearly at the dividing wall between them and Epōle's 300 grid. Scatter and Kartha, as soon as they came within range, sprang up as high as they could to clear the gigantic impediment. Each of the squad's hounds followed their lead, with Hela bringing up the rear on Drom. As she sailed over the dividing wall, Hela noticed that all the pressure plates on its surface were glowing a bright asperite blue. They're lit without anyone tripping them. Is this because of that Crimson Decay lockdown the Rayan commander called for? Hela wondered. Once their team had landed on the streets of the adjoining city circle, Scatter called out, "Everyone, get behind that building over there and cover your ears!" He pointed to a large, ornate building at the end of the street. Hela looked over her shoulder as Drom rocketed toward their cover just in time to see a flash of red-white light paint the sky behind the wall they had just vaulted. A pulse emanated from it that pushed the clouds above it out of the way. And then the sound hit. A chest-pounding thump turned into an ear-rending roar as Drom scampered behind their cover position. The ground quaked and thrashed from the unfathomable power of Falk's explosion. Windows shattered from the vibration in the ground and the shockwaves in the air and the ensuing tidal wave of shrapnel that filled the sky in every direction. Some of the plummeting projectiles were the size of a stone, while others were the size of small buildings. If the destruction of the initial blast didn't damage the city enough, the unceasing bombardment of meteoric impacts upon the surface of the inner round and its surrounding periphery made Scatter's use of lighting orbs in Cull 19 look like child's play. The rumbling lessened as the deadly cascade of brick and stone slowed. Hela's ears were ringing, and her sense of balance was off enough to make her wobbled when she first tried to stand. But after patting herself down for blood, she seemed otherwise unharmed from the effects of the most devastating singular assault since the age of Thut. She looked around at her team. The massive structure they held behind had sheltered them all from the blast and its resulting barrage. However, the rest of the city around her had not been so lucky. As Hela surveyed the surrounding grid from her vantage point, the destruction was near apocalyptic. Buildings toppled and crushed, roadways twisted and pocked with simmering craters. Suddenly, she had a thought. "Kartha, look! The tiles aren't lit!" She pointed at the roofs of the shattered causeways to their right. Brushing his hair free of debris, Kartha followed the direction of Hela's finger. "You're right, Avatar. I saw them lit up bright when we crossed into the 300 grids. This may mean we've critically fractured their network." "Ha ha!" Scatter hollered, pumping a bloodied fist into the air. "We did it! By Grom, we did it! Ha 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 ha!" "We'll know for sure when we get back up on the causeways," said Fald, who had been huddled over Farah during the worst of the blast. "Is everyone good to ride?" Farah asked. "I'm ready to get out of here," chirped Senna in front of Fald. "Me too, Finn, but only if you're riding with me and Drom," Hela added with a joyful grin. Senna nodded, then hopped off of Hülhorn and up onto Drom in front of his sister. "This is the last sprint we have to worry about, my friends," Scatter said, rallying his squad. "So long as the causeways are inoperable, we'll stick to them and allow any path that's not lit in blue to be our guide back to the range of Thut. We've really punched the hornet's nest this time. Keep watch for a Rayan response on the way out. If we run into resistance, break into smaller groups and get around it. We can come back together afterwards. We don't have time to stand around and fight a legion of Rayan troopers. Let's just get out and make for the Hülhorn, understood?" Each raider nodded and raised their flames. Scatter eyed up a nearby access point to launch onto the partially demolished causeway, then shot off with Kartha at a blazing sprint. The team of insurgents followed close behind, landing on the busted-up rooftop of the causeway. Just as they'd suspected, the asperite connection to the surface of the pressure plates had been critically damaged. From her higher vantage point, Hela could now see the horrific devastation they'd wrought upon the city of Epōle. It was as surreal as it was atrocious. From this vantage point, the direction of maximum damage to the asperite network of the city also became obvious. It was like someone had removed a slice of pie. A dark, asperite-free zone fanned out in front of her. Their exfiltration path might as well have been painted in arrows. In the distance, to the left and the right of Hela's position, bright blue lights from the asperite lockdown protocol still shone, contrasting with the wide runway of inoperable grids before her. The 5 hounds streaked across the damaged causeways of the 300 grid toward the dividing wall that would place them outside the inner round and into the final 2 grid circles of Epōle. Hela was letting Drom control their sprint while she kept watch for possible response troopers. Nothing seemed to be moving around her, which was more odd than reassuring. Maybe the lockdown sealed people in their houses the way it happened in Call 19 for quarantine, she thought. Then, out of the corner of her eye, something drew her attention. She couldn't tell what the movement was at a distance, but something was moving toward them a way off. They looked like small blue dots, but were moving in a strange way, almost like they were swinging on ropes at an unnatural height above the ground, zigzagging between buildings over the top of the main streets. Hela called out to Farah, who was the next rider in front of her. "Do you see that? Over that way, look!" She pointed with her right arm as Farah glanced back over her shoulder. "What are those things? They look like they're coming this way." Farah narrowed her eyes, trying to focus on what Hela was pointing out. "What in Grom? I'm not sure. It's hard to make them out." "You saw them too, though, right?" Hela replied, trying to confirm she wasn't seeing things. "Yeah, really weird. I don't like it. Keep an eye out for more of them. We're just about to cross the wall out of the inner round. Hopefully whatever they were will be stuck in the 300 grid." Hela had a bad feeling about those strange objects. It was a reminder of how little they actually knew about Rayan technology and tactics. Those beams at the outer wall in the ceremony were unexpected enough. What else did the Rayan Empire have in their arsenal? Just ahead, the dividing wall between the 300 grid of the inner round and Epōle's 400 grid loomed. "I don't know about you, Finn," Hela said to her brother, nestled in front of her, "but I'll feel a whole lot better on the other side of that wall." "Same." The words were barely out of the young boy's mouth before Scatter and Kartha took to the air in front of the squad, then Fald, then Karta. "Here we go," Hela said as Farah and Barrick leapt in front of them. But before Barrick had reached the apex of his jump, something impossible happened in front of them. A streak of blue light flashed across the top of the wall. Then the entire wall leaned forward in the most unnatural way, as if it were a hand closing around Farah or a wave of solid stone curling over her head. Barrick reacted fast enough to get a couple of paws in front of him, preventing the duo from slamming into the incoming blockade. Then he redirected their ascent to a downward angle after ricocheting off the otherworldly movement of the wall. The collapsing wall stopped short of hitting the ground, leaving what looked like a sort of large stone tent or enclosure. In stopping Farah's escape from the inner round, the massive tomb-like cage also trapped Hela, Senna, and Drom. "Farah!" shouted Hela into the darkness of the entrapment, lit only dimly by her flame. "I'm fine!" Before Hela could make any sense out of what just happened, another streak of blue ripped across the darkness. No, 2 streaks. One headed toward Hela and the other toward Farah in that same strange swinging movement. "Drom!" Hela shouted, unsure of what to do. Drom sprung backward, then diagonally to the right to flee the incoming streak. "They're on Grim Wolves!" A voice from the blue streak shouted out into the dark. "Don't attack head on, Ty!" Hela could tell that the voice was Rayan, but couldn't understand if that meant that there were people behind the streaks, or if they had communication devices on them similar to those of the Peacemen in Epōle. "Hela!" Senna hollered to get his sister's attention. "I think they're people! We've got to light this place up to see them!" Hela understood immediately. "Right!" She raised her flame as high as she could, illuminating all of the surroundings in red light and black shadows. "Farah!" Hela screamed. "Max your flame out! There's people behind those blue lights!" Another bright red light rose from the other side of the stone enclosure, identifying Farah's position and doubling the ambient light inside it. Hela scanned the now visible environment. "Where are you? What are you?" "There!" she yelled to Drom, spotting something zigzagging toward them from their left flank. Drom leapt straight up, twisting halfway to land paws first on the roof above them. Then he shot off like a flash on an intercept course with their would-be attacker, barely missing his target. For a frozen moment, Hela locked eyes with a young Rayan man who was responsible for the streaks of asperite blue. Something about him seemed eerily familiar. He was holding some ornate saber that was emitting the light. It looked different than any other Rayan saber Hela had ever seen. As he passed her position, his movements began to make sense. He was using the saber's asperite force to lock onto parts of his surroundings and pull himself at incredible speeds as if 100 men were yanking him towards each point. "They're Rayans, Farah!" she yelled in confirmation of Senna's suspicion. "It's their sabers! They're using them like grappling hooks to pull themselves around!" "Yeah, I can see that!" Farah shouted back. Hela could hear Beric sprinting and bouncing in reaction to their own adversary. When in Grom's name did they start doing that? I don't know, but they're fast and coordinated. We need to team up, Farah. They're keeping us apart. Come to my light. You come to mine, Farah shouted back amidst several loud smashing sounds. Hela huffed as she avoided her own attacker twice more in quick succession. Drum, let's back Farah up. She felt her hound agree and start to move his countering sprints in the direction of Farah's flame, making sure not to sprint directly toward her in order to confuse their speeding enemy. In just half a dozen leaps and dashes, Drum landed beside Beric. Both of the swinging and streaking Rayans held in an outer strafing pattern, apparently reassessing their strategy now that both of their captors were together. Hela, Senna shouted, catching Farah's attention as well. We're in a fair fight right now. It's 2 of us versus 2 of them. Let's make it an unfair fight. We can make it 5 versus 2. Hela and Farah looked at each other and smiled. All 3 raiders dismounted their hounds as Farah barked out an order. Split up and reinforce whoever they target. Got it? Got it, Hela and Senna responded. 5 bursts of red blasted off in different directions, rebounding off the buildings and walls of the enclosure at various angles. It only took a few of those movements before the blue streaks each chose a target to pursue. One swung after Farah and the other after Senna. Farah tracked the Rayan tailing her. I'm done running, you blasted animal, she snarled. Rebounding off an incoming wall in the opposite direction, the Thutan warrior now headed straight for her Rayan hunter. You're mine, devil, came his voice. The streaking blue asperite of his saber lifted and came down towards Farah's head, but her own blade drove up to meet it. The 2 opponents clashed in a shower of sparks as they blew past each other, sending the Rayan off kilter and slamming hard into the side of a building wall. Farah caught herself against the surface of the stone dome and shot back toward her broken and bloodied foe. Tai! The other screamed. The second Rayan, who was closing in on Senna, broke off his pursuit and headed for his fallen comrade. He'd only just avoided a trap that Drum had set with an intercepting trajectory. Hela assessed his speed. It wasn't going to be enough to beat Farah to her target. He must have realized this as he pointed his saber at Farah herself, latching onto her and pulling her backward while pulling himself forward. The force wasn't enough to freeze her, which seemed to surprise her assailant, but it allowed him to slow her down enough to get himself ahead of the attack. Just as he landed in front of his comrade, but before he could lift him to safety, a blur of black-red shot down from him from above. Beric had caught the Rayan by surprise and was on course to crush him underfoot. Less than an arm's length away from connecting, the hound's target managed to direct his saber enough to buffer the impact. But he couldn't arrest Beric's trajectory. Now the hound was inches away from his face, straining to deliver a killing bite against the unstable, faltering effects of the younger man's saber. Immobilized in a stalemate against Beric, the Rayan didn't even look at the beast trying to kill him. Instead, he locked eyes with his barely conscious comrade. The injured Rayan opened his broken mouth, struggling to say something to the one Beric was smothering. But before he could utter any words, and with wide, teary eyes transfixed on his comrade's, Farah's blade came down at full speed and cleaved his comrade's head from his shoulders. No! 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 The young Rayan screamed. The flickering blue of his saber, which was only just holding Beric back, erupted in a brilliant blue-white shockwave, throwing everyone and everything around him backward as if hit by a tidal wave. The gargantuan pulse of Asperite force pounded into the surrounding stone dome, shattering and launching it in all directions. Beric skidded across the ground like a rock over water, yet somehow managed to scramble to his feet in the process. He saw his master falling through the air to his right and blasted off the ground to catch her. Farah grabbed hold of his mane with her one good hand and swung back onto her mount. Hela! Senna! She shouted on her descent. Over here! Hela called. Drum had already found her and Senna after the shockwave. This is our chance! Farah hollered. We've got to catch up to the others before more of those Ultra Rayan show up! I'm right behind you! Hela called. Drum aimed himself at Beric's flame and blasted off into the air. Both hounds streaked through the gaping hole now left in the dividing wall and took to the causeway roofs of the 400 grid. Hela! Senna said while tucked in front of his sister. That was scary! How did those two do that with the wall and with the explosion under it? Have you ever heard of Rayans doing that? No, I don't know what we're up against anymore. Maybe the Servants of Soul have some secret abilities only their highest warriors know about. Kind of like them not knowing what I could do as the avatar of Grom. Maybe. Senna went silent, watching the vast 400 grid flash past his eyes. They were already well over halfway across Epōle's penultimate grid circle. Off in the distance, Hela could see the last dividing wall before they entered the final grid circle of the city. There was something else in front of it, though. Something that was moving toward them. Quick! Carta! Hela exclaimed with relief, sensing him and Moleth. As he got closer to their position, the wall now a short dash away, Hela noticed he wasn't slowing down his speed. In fact, he was closing in at an all-out sprint. Hela! He yelled. Behind you! Moleth sailed over top of Drom in a blur. Hela turned her head just in time to be showered in Moleth and Carta's blood as an Asperite saber tore through both of them from the other direction. Senna screamed, Carta! But he was gone, falling in pieces to the causeway roof. Hela! Senna screamed again, quivering as blood drenched his face. Hela's mind seized at what she just witnessed, but one sense dominated. Fear. She had never been so afraid in her life. There was something evil about the presence behind her that had just taken her friend's life. It gripped her in a primordial dread that she didn't know existed, shooting waves of cold terror through her body. Everything within her told her to keep running. This wasn't a battle she could turn around and fight. The unvanquished flame inside of her responded to this guttural dread, igniting in an explosion that sped Drom up faster than he'd ever run before. Senna snapped back into his sister from the whiplash, but managed to snag Drom's blazing red-black mane with one hand. They leapt the final dividing wall with such velocity that it seemed they would just fly over the entirety of the expansive 500 grid, finally landing over a quarter of the way across its length. We're gonna make it, right, Hela? Senna pleaded. Just hold on tight, Finn. Don't look back. Just hold on tight and pray, she shouted, tears flying off her face. Senna buried his face in Drom's fur instead of looking back at his sister. Over halfway, Hela thought. We can do this. We can do this. We can make it. We're gonna make it. We have to make it. Her mind was so singularly focused on escaping the city that she hadn't even realized she'd long passed Farah and Barrack in her zero-sum sprint toward the culls. Hela couldn't focus on feeling flames in her state. All she knew is that she had to get Senna out of the city. It became her primal imperative. Nothing else mattered. She was running from a gut feeling, something that defied logic or reason, something she could feel in her soul, and something that, against all odds, was catching up to her. There! She yelled. There! Right there! I can see the cold walls! Senna lifted up his face from where it was nestled in Drom's coat. Before them, the surrounding buildings ended in front of a large body of water, behind which stood the Cull walls. Can we jump the water and the walls? He asked. That's really far! We can do it! Drom can do it! We have to do it! Came Hela's impassioned reply. The feeling of terror creeping up her spine was growing faster than the speed Drom was closing in on the water's edge, but still Hela refused to look behind her. 2 strafes away! The water's right there! Drom's front paws met the very edge of the water as his back legs loaded up for an enormous leap. He exploded with ferocious velocity up into the air and over the surface of the water. This was it. It was enough. His arc would not only clear the wall, but also the entire Cull behind it and land them all into the range of Thut. For some inexplicable reason, though, their escape felt slow. Like their unbelievable speed was still insufficient to escape the specter looming right behind them. Hela could just see the top of the Cull wall when the impossible happened. Beneath her, Drom exploded into a mass of blood and bones. Hela flipped over top of Senna, landing on the very edge of the wall's roof, the activated pressure plates lining it instantly freezing her in place. Senna's flame flared as he flew straight forward, smashing full speed into the wall and then careening back down toward the water below. He hit the middle of the lake with a thumping splash. Hela, suddenly frozen by tremendous amounts of Asperite force, desperately watched the surface of the water for Senna. Moments passed, and then, there! She screamed in her head. Senna's thrashing body broke through the water a few lengths away from his impact point. He screamed, sucking in water between helpless, flailing attempts to stay above it. His shrieking cries tore through the soul of his paralyzed sister. She was being forced to watch on, helplessly, knowing full well that Finn couldn't swim. Senna turned around in the water, flailing, searching for his sister. Then he saw her, locked in stasis high above. Unable to cry out to him, let alone do anything to help, Hela now saw the visage of her dread coming into her peripheral vision. It's him! The single surviving Rayan from the stone dome walked toward the water's edge, holding 2 Asperite sabers glowing unnaturally bright in the early morning light. Hela's mind went into a full-on panic, spinning with vertigo despite her lungs being unable to hyperventilate. The only thing she could focus on was Senna's eyes. The Rayan looked at Senna, struggling for air, then up at Hela, his frozen witness. In one fluid motion, he sprang out over the water, flipped, and descended with a powerful downward slash, splitting little Senna in 2. Hela's vision went black. Words. Someone saying something. Was it words? She felt them. She couldn't understand them, but they felt real. They felt right. Felt raw. She shouted into the darkness, I can feel you! Do something! You have to do something! The Rayan disappeared into the water, slicing through Senna with a single violent, hateful blue blast. Hela's eyes flashed, fully red, flickered, then turned bright white. The morning skies became supernaturally dark as hurricane winds rose out of nowhere and everywhere all at once. Scatter and Kartha landed 2 buildings away from the water when he froze as a soul-splitting shriek hit his body like a hammer. It wasn't a person, but something else, something unnatural and visceral, like pain itself made manifest. Merciful Grom! As the words left his mouth, a flicker of white light sparked from atop the call wall in front of him. Then, again, then... Scatter's journal. Grom is a mysterious mistress to most. Her heart beats in every thoot, yet her ways seem to confuse so many of her children. For my lot, I've never had any difficulty understanding her. She is what we would be if only we permitted ourselves to express our hearts completely. All of the love, all of the fear, and all of the rage, all of it all. None of those things are foreign to her children, yet they seem surprised when their holy mother unabashedly releases them.